Good afternoon, everyone. Now is the time set for the regular board meeting of the Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and the Blind. I'd like to call the meeting to order and proceed with the roll call. Suke, are you able to do the roll call?
If I can find all my buttons, certainly. I believe so. David Nigro,
Present.
Mark Sims,
Present.
Dean Howard,
Present.
Mike Gordon,
Present.
Shelley Herbold, Linda Bove, Lynn Davison,
Present.
Mike Manley,
I'm here.
and myself. Did I miss anybody? I hope not.
I think that's everyone. Thank you.
Mhm.
We can move on to item 1.02, the call of the public. Call of the public on agendized items. I understand that we have had no emails that have been received at the public comment email address by the specified time. This is a format we've taken the last few meetings as we do this via Zoom. So seeing no comments, we can go to 1.03 information item, executive team reports.
Yes, you all have the written reports from IT, HR, and operations. So if you have any questions about the written report, now's the time to ask.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be any questions.
Yeah, there does not seem to be any questions. Thank you. And if there are no questions regarding that item, we can move on to 1.04. Information item, Assistant Superintendent Report. Dr. Rex.
Good afternoon, President Nigro and board members. My report was sent from all my areas for your review, but today we have actual people to give you an opportunity to receive current updates from our schools, the statewide early learning program, our statewide itinerant services, and both our deaf and blind programming, as well as human resources. Each group has been asked to give an update, the most current progress and current state of supporting our students and staff. I will introduce each person and then they will give their report. After their report, you're welcome to ask questions before we move to the next group. Beginning with our schools, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Kelly Creasy and Mrs. Courtney Fritz for their section of their report.
Hello, good afternoon. Just making sure we're doing a sound check. Everyone can hear me okay. Looks like the interpreters are signing, so hopefully that means everyone else can hear me. So good afternoon, Board President Nigro, Superintendent Annette Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Kristen Rex, and all of you board members. We are coming to you again with a joint report because it really is just basically the same information, whether we're talking about the Phoenix campus or the Tucson campus. Kelly and I continue to meet daily at 8 a.m. I think long ago, we thought for sure by December we wouldn't be meeting every day at 8, but we still are meeting. There's a day or here and there that they will cancel for various reasons, but really we have something to talk about almost every day. And it's really just been a huge benefit to collaborate with each other, talk about things that are happening on my campus, talk about things that are happening on Kelly's campus, and make sure that we're in alignment and just have a checks and balances system. So with that, we're joint presenting and we'll take turns. This week, both campuses returned from our 1-week Thanksgiving break, which was last week. That was a change in the school calendar once everything had to shift. So we didn't have an actual fall break, but took the week of Thanksgiving off. So we are all back in person this week. After tomorrow, we'll have 2 weeks left until the winter break. Our goal is still to remain in person for the next 2 weeks up until winter break. I know that everybody, I'm sure, on this call has been looking at the data, looking at the benchmarks, as are we every week. The benchmarks from today did show once again an increase. The school benchmarks or guidelines are still showing an overall hybrid status. But in addition to those benchmarks, because as we know they are delayed, we are looking at real-time data as well. We continue to meet with the Asdb agency team on Fridays to debrief, discuss that data, and make any decisions that might be necessary. But at this time, we are continuing to remain in person up until at least winter break. We have not made a decision as to what January might look like at this time. So with that, it is our version of hybrid learning, which means we're still on a 4-day week schedule, Tuesday through Friday, and offering both in-person and online options, whether that's a family choice or if that's necessary because of medical reasons and or necessary because of COVID exposures. So that is what we are doing on both campuses at this time.
Good afternoon. As many of you know, the AIA postponed all winter sports until January. And so at this time, both campuses are providing after-school strength and conditioning activities for high school students. Again, our small size is what makes this able to happen, as our student athlete population is very small compared to a traditional high school. Both campuses are aiming to participate in competitive sports in January. And at this time, AIA has slotted a competition to begin January 5th. And we are going to continue to monitor the AIA requirements along with the county requirements.
Okay, and hopping back a little bit to our hybrid, I know that we previously provided numbers as to how many students were doing the online option, and we wanted to once again provide you an update on those numbers. On the PDSD campus, I currently have 58 students that have remained online, and on the Tucson campus, Kelly has 21. The numbers overall have remained pretty consistent since coming back in person, but there has been some fluctuation. So when we opened in person, we asked families to make the decision from that date, which mine was early October, Kelly's was later into October, up until winter break. So we were really trying to get them to make a decision so that we could plan accordingly. With that being said, we know that things change. So we have not been so firm on that we wouldn't let families make a change if there was a valid reason that they were requesting that change. So we have had a few students who were online that then requested to come back in person, and a few students who were in person that requested to go back fully online. But that has been a one-time change throughout this period from October until now. So that's an update on the numbers, but knowing that the same, I think the first time I reported the numbers, it was 56. It wasn't just that 2 more students joined online. There was a little bit more movement on both campuses for students changing their programming options in the course of the quarter.
And to give you a health and safety update, as Courtney mentioned, we did return to in-person learning after Thanksgiving break this week. However, the Tucson campus had to start their Thanksgiving break 2 days early due to a shortage of transportation staff after an identified positive case within that department. Our families were amazing. Our staff were amazing as we contacted them on Wednesday afternoon and let them know that we were going to be sending students home early that Thursday morning. That whole plan went seamless. Huge thank you to the transportation department, to our student health center, our dorm staff, our teachers, and our school secretaries who were able to contact all parents on the Tucson campus within a 45-minute period. Also, as you may know, there was a recent executive order released about mandating face coverings in all schools. That was already a requirement on our campuses for both staff and students. And I think Courtney and I can both say that our students have been phenomenal in complying with wearing their face coverings. It has been a very easy transition for them and has not become a management issue at all. They are very compliant. So we are grateful to them. We're grateful to their families who are working with them to ensure that they have a clean face covering every day and are coming to school prepared.
And with that, we do want to acknowledge that these times are hard and they're challenging. Hopefully, we both look extremely rested and just on top of the world and on top of our game, and things are just all puppies and rainbows. Hopefully, that's what we look like. But it's hard. Every day is a challenge, and there are new factors and new situations that are thrown at us daily. And that is certainly true at the administrative level, just as we're making decisions and keeping our ship afloat, for lack of a better word. But it's even more so, I say more so, I don't know, it's hard to compare apples and oranges. The reality is that everybody working on campuses right now, it's a hard time and it's a challenge. And what we see from our staff is that they go above and beyond for our students every single day. Majority of our instructional staff are having to toggle both in-person and digital learning at the same time. And that is extremely hard. And although we had time at the beginning of the year to do professional development, this hasn't been something that teachers learned in graduate school or something that they experienced and they're now in their 25th year of teaching, or first year teachers who didn't expect that, number one, their student teaching would be interrupted, and then their first year of teaching, they'd have to figure out how to manage, dual modes of learning and instruction. And this has been a huge undertaking. And I think we need to be honest to say and communicate with the board that there are still daily challenges. We see our staff growing and learning in many ways that none of us would have ever predicted, and they're doing it effectively, and they're doing the very best that they can every day. But we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge, like I said, this is hard, and these are challenging days, and we do see the impact on staff, the morale, their social and emotional well-being. And we try our best every day to provide support and think out of the box. What can we do to support staff? What can we do to give them, a shout out, a praise, hang in there, just recognition that this is hard. We continue to have conversations, like I said, provide support, come up with creative ways to try and keep everyone's spirits high. We've done things like a sunshine cart where we roll around with snacks to just have them pick a snack. The Tucson campus to have a visit from their little annual elves, so that they've made an appearance this month in December, which I think is helping them, put a smile on their face. Both campuses are doing 15 days of holiday fun where staff can, wear jingle bells and Christmas traditions from around the world and different kind of dress up things just to make it fun. We've both tried to do digital e-cards, again, just bringing a smile to their face. The program that we use has one card that says things are bananas, which is true, and hopefully it makes everybody chuckle a little bit and know that we can do hard things. So I guess we're coming to you today with a request that we really think of formal recognition from the board to staff members of just knowing how hard they're working, and every day they're showing up, and they're showing up for the kids because that's what they do.
And hopefully you had an opportunity to read our board report, and we wanted this afternoon just to provide you with the latest information. And at this time, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
Courtney, how many students are on campus right now? I know you said that 58 are at home, but how many are on campus?
So from K-12, there are about 205 on campus. And then with preschool numbers, I'm sure Kendra can speak a little bit more from the ELP program, but preschool are doing 2 days a week. So I think based on their 2 days, we probably have, you know, approximately 230 students on campus every day with their numbers included.
And Kelly, how many?
So between the preschool and the K-12, we probably have about 110 students on campus on a daily basis.
Thank you.
This is Mike Manley. Have we noticed a higher ratio of students with an MD or MDSSI label needing on-site services compared to not?
So on the Tucson campus, actually most of my online students are the MDSSI students due to additional health concerns that have moved us in that direction, which has made that online component even more challenging. So yes, unfortunately, that's our higher population online at the moment in time.
And for the PDSD campus, it's actually the opposite. So we only have about 8 students that are MD-SSI that remain online. Majority of the online students are from what we would consider the general education track of deaf and hard of hearing students.
Sorry, thank you.
If there are no other questions for Kelly and Courtney, I want to thank you for your report. Fantastic information. Oh, I see David talking, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I just had one other question. I know, you know, looking at, one, thank you for everything that you guys have been doing. And I'm happy to see that, you know, the students have a choice to be on campus or to be at home and learning online, depending on, you know, all the variety of factors that go into that decision. You know, I know looking at the report from today, you know, at least in Maricopa County, we're 372 cases per 100,000. So that's over three times what the Department of Health says is substantial. Our positivities about 11.5%. And the third benchmark is at 7.2%. Very similar numbers in Pima. You know, what is that? What's our time frame for making other decisions about next semester, and what are we looking for in this data to move us one way or the other?
So Board President Nigro, we meet every Friday with our superintendent, assistant superintendent, and Maria. And that is one of our topics of conversation for tomorrow. So we just got the data today, and we'll be taking a deeper look at that tomorrow. And that is our day typically to make decisions moving forward. So every Friday we're meeting and looking at that and planning for what's coming next. So I anticipate tomorrow our conversations will be thinking heavily about what we're going to do in the next couple of weeks, and then what's going to happen after the Christmas break.
Okay. Great. Yeah, because I mean, it seems like we do have the majority students attending on, on campus. It just, as those numbers get up there, I become concerned for the, the students and for the staff. So thank you for looking at that.
Are there any more questions for Kelly and Courtney?
Yeah, this is Mike Gordon. Kelly, you mentioned, you said I think 110 students on Tucson campus. Can you give me the breakdown on that? I mean, as far as how many are maybe K-12, how many, did you say they were early intervention or the preschool age, or how's that breakdown, just so I have an idea?
Kendra can probably give you more specifics into exactly how many preschool. I was just kind of ballparking. So
That's
I
fine.
have 21 students that are online. And so I have 90 students that are on campus, K-12.
Okay. Quite a lot. Okay. Thank you.
Hi there. I just wanted to tell you that I'm here. This is Shelly. I didn't want to interrupt your conversation, but I am here.
Welcome, Shelley. Anyone else have a question? Mike?
Oh, I was just saying hello to Shelley.
All right. Well, if we have no more questions for our principals, I'm going to thank them and let them jump off the hot seat and go ahead and go dark. And we're going to pull up, next is our Director of Early Learning Programs. And that would be Ms. Kendra Benedict. You're up, my dear.
Hello, good afternoon. I want to thank Kelly and Courtney for their energetic reports. I appreciate their energy every day and their support of my programs on their campuses. So thank you both. Good afternoon, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, Board President Nigro, and members of the board. The unique circumstances of the last 9 months have required schools everywhere to be more creative, more flexible, more willing, more collaborative. I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity today to share with you how the early learning program has been exemplifying these characteristics. It takes more than a little creativity to educate 3- and 4-year-olds online, while at the same time offering in-person options. Our Simonton, PDSD, and ASDB locations are all doing just that, as are our Foundation for Blind Children and Desert Voices partners. Michael Olivier, supervising teacher at PDSD over the preschool, reports that he's giving 2 to 3 virtual tours of PDSD every week, using Zoom on an iPad as he walks through the preschool building, showing families the classrooms. 31 students are currently enrolled in Tucson. 22 of those are online. 22 of those are in person and 9 are online. We anticipate 6 more students transitioning this month, putting total enrollment at 37. 46 students are currently enrolled in Phoenix, 34 in person and 12 online. We are anticipating 12 more to transition this month in Phoenix, putting total enrollment at 58. If these enrollment trends continue as predicted, we will end this calendar year with more students than we did this time last year. Flexibility. Evidence-based research is at the core of what we do in the early learning program. While it takes an extraordinary amount of flexibility to conduct research during a global pandemic, doing so is still critical to the future success of our students. I'm excited to share that after a visit to Tucson and Phoenix the week prior to Thanksgiving, Haley Broadway, protactile expert and education specialist, was successful in recruiting families for her study. Haley will return to Tucson next week for 3 to 4 months, during which time she will work with infants and toddlers who are deafblind and their families, educating them on protactile sign language. Willingness. The willingness of early learning providers to better themselves at their craft never stops, even during a global pandemic. Join me in congratulating Marlia Jacobson, Morgan Scadden, Caitlin Empey, and Soren Mickelson as they embark on their journeys to become listening and spoken language specialists. I want to thank Amanda Beneke, who will be providing over 120 hours of mentorship to these candidates over the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you, Amanda. Collaboration. Arizona uses a team-based approach to early intervention services. This collaboration has never been more important to our birth to 3 providers than it is now. We're working closely with our AZIP partners in developing recommendations for safely resuming limited in-person services. Although given recent metrics, it does not appear we will be resuming in-person services soon. Included in AZIP's recommendations are guidance on providing compensatory services. What that will look like has yet to be determined. In the meantime, our birth to 3 teachers continue to provide tele-intervention to 307 families around the state. They provide alternative services, meaning email, phone, text, to 42 additional families. Thanks to our partnership with the Ear Foundation and Arizona Hands and Voices, we are currently providing 43 families with devices in order for them to receive services. In closing, I want to share just a few more statistics with you, as well as a short story behind those statistics. After months of collaboration with AZIP, we are moving forward with serving children birth to age 3 with unilateral hearing loss. This is a first for ASDB and will add significantly to our teachers' caseloads over the coming months. The hearing screening and follow-up survey, published annually by the Office of Newborn Hearing Screening and submitted to the CDC, recently released preliminary 2019 data on bilateral and unilateral hearing loss. In 2019 in Arizona, out of 80,454 births screened, 184 children were identified with hearing loss. Of those, 84 were identified with permanent bilateral hearing loss and 68 with permanent unilateral loss. Behind each one of those numbers is a child, a family, and a story. Recently, one of our new teachers, Amber, received a referral for a little one weeks after she started with us this summer. Her supervising teacher worked the case with her for the first couple of weeks and then backed out. The child was multiply involved and medically fragile. So much so, he was not able to go home to be with his family. During Amber's first 3 months on the job, she advocated for the family and made sure they had access to their child via teleservices. The child had a surgical procedure from which he did not regain consciousness. During the last meeting Amber had with the family and the medical team, the parents were given an extremely difficult decision to make, and they decided to remove the life support in place for their sweet child. Amber spent the day getting car seats for the family so the siblings could join their parents on what would be this little one's last day of life. This was the first family ever placed on Amber's caseload with us as an early intervention teacher. The following day, we received this letter from the lead social worker at the hospital. I am writing in regard to Amber, whom I've had the pleasure of working with this past week with our mutual patient. Amber not only facilitated multiple conversations with parents and the hospital staff, but she assisted the family with transportation, ensured that their children had safe car seats to sit in, and was present at the hospital throughout the day yesterday during the child's withdrawal of life support. She truly went above and beyond her role, and we are forever grateful for her advocacy, support, and engagement with this family. During the 15 years I have worked as a social worker in the intensive care unit, I have never met someone that was so willing to assist the hospital and the family this much during this time of crisis and despair. Our gratitude for Amber's help is immeasurable, and we wanted to share just how grateful we are for her support. So in closing, I too want to share my gratitude for not only Amber, but for all early learning teachers, instructional assistants, speech language therapists, audiologists, administrative assistants. Even during a global pandemic, they don't lose sight of the importance of caring for each individual they serve, parents and children alike, by meeting them where they are and with what they need. That's all I have for you this afternoon. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Dr. Benedict, for that report. I did have a question about the transition from to preschool. Those transitions are always difficult in normal times in terms of being able to usher families to go from the early intervention program into the preschool of their choosing. And I would assume that that's a lot more difficult now that our early intervention is mostly or all online. So can you speak to how those transition meetings have been occurring in the last few months, and if we're keeping track of the destinations for these children, in terms of where they're going, and how the parents are making those decisions, and are we making sure that the parents feel that they have appropriate guidance as to where they should place their child?
Yes, I can definitely speak to that. Thank you. In just looking at our preschool numbers, they are higher than I anticipated that they would be going into this school year. But like I said in my report, we're on track to end this calendar year with more students than we had this time last year. I don't have any scientific evidence to prove this, but one of my guesses is that a lot of families are choosing charter schools, smaller type programs that allow for fewer students in a class, which not only typically results in, good things all around for kids, but at this period of time allows for social distancing, things like that. So I think that could be one reason. There are parts of the state where we're having more difficulty in reaching districts to assist with that transition, and AZIP is helping us with that. But everything, the transition is continuing to occur within the timelines that it is supposed to occur. Our biggest challenge right now is our late identifications. We are getting children, especially down in the Southwest area, that have not been identified, and they're over 2 years old with profound hearing loss. And Courtney was very frank in her speaking with you, and I can be very frank in saying I'm very concerned as to how ready these kiddos are going to be for kindergarten. We're getting kids that are identified so late right now with significant hearing loss and significant language delays, and it's going to have a tremendous impact in the next few years on the kids we have entering kindergarten.
Thank you. Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. First of all, that mid-2 is way too late for identification. That's stark. My question was, in looking at, in meeting with the finance team yesterday, it looks like we have a lot of infants and toddlers that are identified as deafblind. I think it was like 98, and I was just surprised that that seems to be it felt like a very large number. Are we prepared with the resources that those kiddos are going to necessarily take when they transition, both into preschool and then possibly into brick and mortar? I just kind of taken aback by the number of students in that category.
I'm so glad you asked. That's a great question. I might have mentioned in one of my previous reports last spring, but that seems like 10 years ago, that we were in the process of planning to open a preschool classroom in Tucson for our deafblind population. We have a critical mass of kiddos down there, and that is where this whole conversation of the research that we're now bringing here. It was the week before the world changed forever. Jennifer Hensley and I were at Gallaudet, met with some researchers who knew of this critical mass of kiddos we had and wanted to offer us not only their support, but a mutual relationship that could develop where they could help to educate us, our families, and we had these kiddos that they wanted to take a look at, and yet the program didn't open. We couldn't move forward with it because of COVID, but we were still able to move forward with the research. It's looking very different now than it had originally planned to look, but they're still moving forward with it. So we still have those contacts to assist us. We have Lisa Yancarelli and her group. We work closely with Megan and others in her group, Amy, at supporting our preschool teachers as they get these kiddos in. It's a little bit easier in birth to 3 for our teachers of the deaf and our teachers of the blind to work together in that fashion. Comes a little more challenging with preschool, but we're working on that as well. So I appreciate the question. Thank you very much.
Can I follow up? Are we anticipating a big cohort? Because I know when at the birthday of 3 is when that happens. Are we anticipating more this year or next year based on just that big group of kids' ages? Do we need to parse it out, or?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, this time last year, we had a group of kiddos that over the course of this school year, the 1920 school year, if we would have started a classroom, we would have ended this May of 2020 with about 12 kids of deafblind kids in a preschool classroom, which is a big number. And sadly enough, we did lose a few of those children. A few of them passed away. Many of them have severe medical needs. A couple of them moved back to Mexico when the pandemic hit. So those numbers went down, which made it even more difficult for our researchers to find families to participate. So that's been a challenge. So we're working really hard to identify these babies, keep track of them, and make sure they have resources. I think that brings me to, one perhaps notable point is that birth to 3 teleintervention has been an amazing tool. We probably had an easier time at transitioning to it than preschool did, most certainly, because you're working with parents, you're coaching parents. However, for our blind and VI families, it has been a little challenging, more so than with deaf and hard of hearing. Because with those kiddos, you do so much more manipulation. There's physical needs that children have, and it's hard to use the camera strategically to model and show how to do all of those things. And certainly I know Lisa can speak probably better to that than I can, not being a blind VI teacher myself, but they are facing more challenges and really hope to get back in the homes as soon as they possibly can. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Any further questions for Kendra? Well, nice job, Kendra. That's your spiel. You're good. Thank you. And next we have our Director of Statewide Itinerant Services, and that would be Jay Johnson. He's going to come on and share some information with how our amazing teachers and everyone is pushing into multiple districts with multiple different protocols and making it work.
Thank you, Dr. Rex. And you're right, we do have an amazing team and the entire co-ops together. And I'm pleased to report to the board again some amazing numbers that we have, as well as the work that we've been doing as it relates to the redesign. Before I get to the information I wanted to provide on the work that we've been doing statewide, I wanted to share a little bit beyond that work. And I wanted to share my COVID story with the board. So my COVID story actually starts just around Friday, November 13th. Up to that point, I had traveled over 7,000 miles within our state, visiting sites, campuses, staff, visiting with special education directors and whatnot. And then on Saturday, November 14th, I tested positive for COVID. I quickly contacted our HR department to let them know about my test. And through contact tracing, they were able to connect with all staff that I had been around on Sunday, November 15th. To this date, no other staff members tested positive due to the interaction with me. This goes back to the leadership this board has really enhanced as it looks to the redesign and the cooperatives. Underneath the topics of consistency, sustainability, quality assurance, managing and changing and timing, and vision and philosophy. Because those have been the indicators that we've had within the co-ops, I'm going to pick a couple of those and report to the board how we are working on consistency, quality assurance, and managing change and timing along with vision and philosophy. So under consistency, first, to give you a picture of the work that we're doing statewide, we have 214 school districts and charters that we currently have agreements with statewide. This brings to us just over 1,000 students, 1,002 to be exact. Of those students, the primary disabilities we have, 189 students that are MD-SSI, 210 students that their primary label is MD, 127 that their primary label is VI, and 476 of their primary label HI. Consider that our staff has been putting in about 594,897 minutes a month for those students. This comes out to just over 9,000 hours a month that our staff is providing services statewide. To make sure that we're consistent within that statewide effort, we meet weekly with our co-op directors to discuss different topics that range from audiology to VI services to HI services, along with developing forms to align our work. First, the directors and I meet each week to talk about audiology scenarios. These may be scenarios that do not fit into the boxes that we have for our referral form, so we can be accurate with what we're saying to each one of the audiology teams and making sure that we are sending them out at the right time with the right scenario with the right protection. In addition to that, one of the things that the co-op directors and I did is we've started to design documentation for statewide services. The Docs of Service page that was designed by our directors did come with a few hiccups, which we needed to provide overall training for staff, and we were able to connect experts in-house to support staff members that may have struggled using the Google Forms. One comment that came from a staff member was thanking us for that particular form. She stated, "It's good to see that the agency is starting to use the same forms, inventory, and policies uniformly throughout the agency." Under quality assurance, we've been working hard with our Region 1 and the part of the redesign. As you know, Dr. Faye Miller left us during the summer, and this brought DVR along as part of that redesign process, because in addition to my responsibilities statewide, I've also been acting as the director for DVR. So we plan next year to bring SER to be embedded into the work we've done this year, going into next academic year. So with that work between DVR and Region 1, we've started to look at the audiology referral forms. DVR designed an audiology referral form that is 100% online, as did Region 1. The directors and I meet together each week to discuss the cases as it relates to those referral forms and how we're evaluating appropriate students. Just to give you a snapshot of DVR, our two audiologists have received over 115 referrals this academic year. That is possibly 115 more students added into the DVR site than there were before. Some of those students may not qualify for specially designed instruction. That's why we can't say that all of those students are receiving services from us at this time. In addition to that, we've been tracking direct services versus consult only. In Region 1, we know that 92% of our services are direct services. In Region 2, which is our DVR location, 97% of the services we provide are direct communication and direct work with students. The other thing that we've done internally is asking the question, what is itinerant teaching at ASDB? In order to answer that question, we've surveyed our lead teachers and supervisor teachers as it relates to job duties of all teachers statewide. The leads have been meeting this month in December to discuss that survey and look at consistencies that we have statewide. Also, we've met with the University of Arizona and their DHH department and the VI department. We've also met with ASU's VI department. We've also met with an out-of-state university, with the University of California, their VI department. And we've been highly connected with CAC and AZKs. We've had opportunities to collaborate with other DHH teachers in the Phoenix area. Under managing change and timing, one of the goals we had within the co-ops was to utilize our ADOT services more this academic year. ADOT provides our services for all vehicles, and they also have fueling stations around the state of Arizona. Before focusing on this, we had about 33% of our staff utilizing ADOT as fueling stations. That has risen to 66%, and 52% of those staff members are using ADOT 100% of the time. This cost savings can be hundreds of dollars each month. The other thing the directors and I have done is built the culture of professionalism and support. The work that we've done this year have enabled our staff to understand email norms, meeting norms, and upholding the same norms for all staff members statewide. The other part that the directors and I talk about consistently is this idea of total support. Total support to our staff is meeting their needs in their location and what they need from us. I have to give a shout out not only to our two directors, Paya and Michelle, but also all of our lead teachers, supervisor teachers, and staff that support each other on a daily basis. It truly is a total support community. Under vision and philosophy, we're getting to the idea of thinking as one co-op. A couple examples of this is we had audiology equipment that was shared between Region 1 and the SER office. Our audiologist even shared today, it gave the opportunity for a student in the Tucson area to access curriculum, and without that communication between the two regions, the student would not have been able to access the curriculum because the technology would have to be ordered for them. That's one example that we've done statewide. Also, we've closed the Holbrook office, and in closing that office, we've sent materials to the Sedona office as well as the Tucson office. We had staff that drove from Sedona to Holbrook to make sure that we had the right materials going up to the northwest side of Arizona. And then we also had a moving company support us to move all other materials down to the Tucson office. As part of that process, we also evaluated our vehicles. We had vehicles that moved from the Holbrook office down to our DVR office to make sure we met the needs of our staff down there and putting them in the right types of vehicles with the lowest amount of mileage. We've also had interpreters who've traveled between regions. One example was we had a DVR interpreter that traveled to Region 1 to support a student when an interpreter was ill. The other part of our vision and philosophy is we send out weekly amazing co-op emails. Through these emails, we provide resources, support, and connections to other community members, as well as resources that are statewide and even out of state. Some of the topics that have come across through those emails were the post-school outcome survey that's done through ADE. What was amazing through that, we connected that work to student referrals to Project Search. We actually had an interpreter that was very surprised that we collect that data every year and was able to refer one of her students to Project Search as a young adult. We've also been able to connect to Northern Florida University and the virtual job fair this year and connecting our HR department. We've also had the DVR interpreters sharing resources statewide with the entire co-op. We've started an event called A Cup of Joe with Jay, where I've simply set up either virtual coffee talks or in-person coffee and sitting down and just talking about the roles that our staff plays statewide. One of the comments that's come out through those amazing emails is, I admire your compassion in acknowledging how difficult this year has been on so many, many families. You're so uplifting and positive. You inspire me. We continue to inspire not only our fellow staff members, but our school districts and charters, our students, and even our family members, knowing that we're putting their student needs first statewide. With that said, the last thing I'll share with you, we've also been connecting our work with the statewide CEDAR program and Ed Rising. Through that work, we'll be presenting at the National CEC conference under a teacher empowerment project that we've been working hand in hand with our CEDAR counterparts. And we want to make sure that we continue the Ed Rising connection because they are our future teachers. Ed Rising is the high school program that falls under CTE and for students that are interested in becoming educators. Not only are we connecting with the high school program, but the Ed Rising programming that's at the community college and the university. So new teachers know all about Asdb and coming to work for the co-ops or our ground campuses. Thank you for your time today, and please let me know if you have any questions.
This is Mike Manley. Just a quick question. I know that over the last year, we've transitioned somewhat to online delivery of services. Has that primarily affected kids in the north? And how do we go about determining which kiddos would do better with that kind of a format?
You know, Mike, that's a great question, and thank you for asking that. What's interesting is we're finding statewide the same type of work that's happening. So our schools, as you guys all know, are opening in person one day, and the next day they're closing and going virtual. And we're seeing that pattern statewide. We've been in close contact with our special education directors because way back in August, we had about 50% of our staff that was providing services in person while schools will still remained on a virtual format. So we probably have right around that same number still. However, more and more schools, due to the rise in COVID cases, are going 100% virtual. But our communication between the SPED directors and case managers have really driven that type of procedure.
Would you anticipate the need for that going up as we find efficiencies and student outcomes? Or it's probably too early to ask that.
It's actually not too early to ask that. And one of the other parts that I did prepare, but I was going to try to stay within my 6 minutes, was the work that we've done with our distance learning. Distance has actually expanded. And these are distance students that are 100% virtual, not because of COVID, but that they're moving the direction of saying, I want my child to be in a distance learning format. And we've watched that grow through distance, where simply 2 years ago, we had 2 students in 1 school. Now we have 91 students in 55 schools statewide. And these are students that are not in distance because of COVID. And we continue to see that rise of numbers. We actually have a new district that just signed on with us that they were 100% interested in distance learning. And we're going to provide services for all students there on the distance format.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, with that, thank you, Jay. Oh, David's back, sorry.
No, just anticipating taking over. Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Dr. Rex. Dr. Rex, is there anything more to add?
Well, I have also Jennifer Hensley, Lisa Yancarelli, and Anita Payette at this point.
That sounds good.
I think we're going to call up Jennifer Hensley.
Sorry, Jennifer is not able to join us this afternoon.
Okay, my apologies.
Move on to the next report, please. Thank you.
We're going to go to Lisa Yancarelli then.
Hi, everyone. So as you know, I'm the director of blind programs, and blind programs are our team works to support the instructional programming statewide. So since the beginning of the school year, we've provided assistance, training, and equipment to anyone who's requested assistance. Because of the unique nature of this school year, our assistance has been adapted to meet the needs of the students. So I commend my team for their flexibility and their hard work and their willingness to jump in and do things a little differently from the way we have in the past to really ensure that our students, families, and teachers are getting what they need. We really, all the areas of blind programs really focus a lot on equipment and access. So it is our priority to make sure that students and teachers have what they need so the students can access no matter where they are. And as we know, it changes daily. So we continue to get requests for equipment on a daily basis. So I'm going to highlight some of the things that are happening with all the different areas that I support. So the first is the Arizona Deafblind Project. We're a federally funded grant that provides technical assistance and training to schools and families statewide. It is a federal program, so that means we also support families that are not within the Asdb system. At this time, we have seen an increase in requests to provide support and guidance to our school-based teams to navigate the implementation of IEP services in that remote setting, as well as the typical requests that we get for assistance on communication systems, access to the general education curriculum, and specific deafblind strategies. We do have a strong partnership with the ELP team, and that is part, her team is so wonderful, and that's why you see so many numbers of our infants, the births to 3, with the combined vision and hearing loss, is because our teachers are diligent about it and work so closely together, and then bring us in. So we work closely with them. They meet on a bi-monthly basis to have trainings that are specific to that birth to 3 environment. The Deafblind Project, we also provide training to staff specifically for interveners, but it's open to anyone that wants to take it through the Open Hands, Open Access modules. And we do that statewide. And currently we are providing that training to 42 people statewide. Statewide Braille production is another area of blind programs. As you know, we've been working to scale up the Braille production system that was started in SER, and we are in our second year of that scale up. So we have transferred supervision of staff under blind programs for some. The final will be next year, but our production staff has been working nonstop. So all of our Braille technicians and Braillists are working to provide those accessible materials to all of our students. So that includes formatting documents for use with screen readers or Braille devices, our tactile graphics and embossed Braille, as well as providing recordings. We keep track of the requests that come in. And as I was updating the data today, I saw that there is a student who is now also receiving some recorded stories, and I hadn't seen that before. So kudos to that team and to that Braille staff that is now recording stories that may not be available in another audio format. That's why they're doing that. So I provided data on the numbers, but that was submitted November 5th, and the numbers have changed. So I want to give you an update. So since the beginning of the school year, Braille production have completed 534 documents to use on devices and completed 1,955 requests for embossed Braille and tactile graphics. I just want to make note that tactile graphics take a very long time, and there's no way for us to capture that at this moment, but there is a significant increase in tactile graphics and the need for helping to add audio description to things because of schools being in that virtual system. Classroom teachers are relying very heavily on PowerPoints and slides, so that is causing our Braille staff and our teachers also provide that same support. So we're having an increase for that. Moving on to my low vision team. So low vision, our office provides equipment, support, and training statewide. We've been assisting teachers in selecting the appropriate low vision devices, assisting in conducting functional vision assessments and learning media assessments, which is a challenge in the remote environment. So our low vision specialist has been exploring options and providing guidance, because some of these things do need to happen in person. And so what's the best way to gather the information if you can't be there in person? And we also provide training on the use of those devices. So during this time, we're really trying to we're working with the teachers and the families to make sure that students have whatever device they need to access their instruction. no matter where they are. We're also, we're working with our teachers to make sure that they understand, for our students with low vision, like example, my background is far too cluttered. It should be a blank background, talking about lighting, what is best for our kids with low vision and cortical visual impairment. So she works hard on that in talking with teachers about that. To date, our office has distributed 186 devices. That includes our handheld magnifiers, portable CCTVs, regular CCTVs, and binoculars. Moving on to my other section, the American Printing House for the Blind repository and our assistive technology equipment. So ASDB receives those specialized materials and equipment from the American Printing House for the Blind, and we have a repository that sends out that equipment statewide. So it's items like slant boards, can be specialized equipment for science, an abacus for math, special Braille stickers, other Braille materials, and any other adapted equipment from APH. In addition to doing that, my APH staff also distributes the assistive technology equipment that is not provided by APH. So most of our Braille, refreshable Braille displays, embossers, large print keyboards. So the data for that, we have distributed 179 Braille writers of all kinds statewide, 54 refreshable Braille displays and devices, 33 embossers, and 10 large print keyboards. And finally, the other area that I support is assistive technology and equipment statewide. So part of that is the tablets, Chromebooks, and laptops. So we have met the need of every request so far. And we have had an increase, of course, and we work very closely with IT to make sure that we have the equipment that we need and that we can get it out to the staff. So at the beginning of the school, we gave a total of 61 devices specifically from the assistive technology. And so those devices are considered assistive technology. In addition to the equipment, we started a new activity to support our teachers with assistive technology. So we began at the beginning of the school year holding weekly Zoom drop-in calls. And so the purpose of the call was to allow teachers to come together with our more experienced assistive technology people so they could ask questions and problem solve and get the support they needed as they were trying to navigate remote learning. Many of these platforms that school districts were choosing were not accessible. And so we had to work with that and figure out what is accessible. So the structure of the call is that we usually spend about 10 to 15 minutes with somebody demonstrating either a device or resources that we found. And then the remaining part of the call, it's time for teachers to ask questions and brainstorm about their specific needs. So at the beginning of the year, we had a heavy need. We were meeting weekly. As the attendance started to drop, I surveyed teachers and they chose to go monthly. So we are now on a monthly Zoom call. And so we'll keep that up. If the needs do increase, I will increase the time in the call, but it really is their time to ask for help. We brainstorm, we look at equipment. And then finally, something that's very exciting that we've been talking about, and I know that I brought it up at a previous board meeting about that all-in-one system that I'm dreaming of. So it may actually become a reality. That thank you, IT, to work with us. Blind Programs is going to work to have their own similar email request and ticketing system that mirrors the IT request system. So I thank IT for helping us and guiding us through this. So we're going to pilot with a couple of key staff, some of our staff that request a lot, so that my staff can work out how it works. And we anticipate that then any request for support or equipment that comes through Blind Programs will be through this one email system, so that the entire team can look at it, and so that we can meet the needs of everyone more efficiently. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to full implementation of that system for the 2021 school year. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation. I did have a couple of questions on the statewide Braille production. And in terms of the requests, you talked about a certain number of requests and a certain number of documents coming through. Are those requests quizzes or tests that are a few pages, or are they, textbooks which are, a much different animal than just a few pages?
So in our system, we do not do entire textbooks. We only do pages that are required. So it varies. Sometimes they are quizzes and assignments. We have the textbooks, but we don't Braille the entire textbook. We follow the scope and sequence, whatever the teacher has requested. I think you'll find that in most classrooms, they never use the entire textbook. So there are cases where we will purchase a textbook if we feel that is needed, as opposed to having our Braille production staff do that. We also do any benchmark testing that the district may be doing. We're really trying to make sure that any piece of paper that comes across a sighted child's desk, our blind child also receives. And we work really hard at that. Again, the requests are all over the place because it depends on the individual child. We have some students that are in advanced placement courses. So of course the load of reading and requires more Braille. Some are in some very advanced science and math courses, which increases the number of tactile graphics that are required. And then of course, when you go down to the elementary level, the assignments are shorter. The text is not as robust, and the tactile graphics are not as intensive. So we have the full range.
Right, and that's really more what I was getting to is what's the right metric to talk about what the Braille production is producing, because there is that gamut of, a high school calculus book is a lot more time intensive, labor intensive, and again, not just the book, but pages of it. Is a lot more time intensive than what you might have in for second grade or a short PowerPoint or something like that. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's a better metric to help us get a better idea of the work that's being done, other than just the number of requests, because they can be they can vary in size and complexity quite a bit.
Yes, I agree, and we're open to any suggestions.
Okay. And in terms of the turnaround time for that, I know we heard some reports last spring, late March, early April. There were some delays, which I think were understandable at the time, given the COVID situation that evolved. But from the beginning of the year, can you give us a sense of what the turnaround time is typically like from the time a request is made to the time that material is delivered to a student?
So it's typically just a couple of days. We do ask that schools give us the request 5 days in advance and let us know the due date. A lot of times it's the very next day or the same day. Once we have like the students that have very intense work, they have a dedicated Braille staff and have a relationship with that teacher. And so they get things in advance. And we try to work ahead as much as possible, so there is not a delay. We really don't like it, and really ask that our teachers, the general ed classroom teachers, consider the production time when they're making a request, because it is difficult to produce something that is heavy tactile graphics within a day. So we typically, it's a 2 to 3 day turnaround.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to get a better idea that we're being consistent on that, and it's not unreasonably long. Great, that was all I had.
Okay.
This is Mike. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Mike.
You talked about distributing a lot of the equipment, Chromebooks, laptops, etc., stuff that doesn't come through Printing House. is that for generally for staff's use or students' use? And particularly when Jay was talking about 90 students working remotely in distance learning, how are you connecting those equipment requirements with I mean, that's a daunting task, particularly when you're talking about the North Country. So how
Yes.
are you doing that, and how are you making that connectivity in that?
A lot of collaboration and cooperation. So it's a mix. Our devices are a mix of teachers and students. It depends, again, it depends on the request. We need our teachers to have the tools that they need in order to provide instruction. Likewise, the student needs their device in order to receive that instruction. So we do work closely with our partner districts. And if they don't have what is needed, typically it is something so specialized that it's something that we are providing. So we do have, our laptops that are loaded with Fusion, which is JAWS and Zoom Text, and, any other, sometimes it's Talking Typer, whatever specialty software that needs to be on there. Likewise with the tablets, we, put the specialty apps that are needed on there, but it does take a lot of collaboration between the teacher, our teachers, the classroom teachers, the families, and the students. And we just, we've had I thank everyone for being flexible, and we problem solve, and we get the IT department from our Asdb also work closely with the IT department from the districts to make sure that we have that connectivity. Whatever issues we may have, we all have to communicate and work together.
Okay. One just follow up to that. No, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I got it. I'm sorry. I was trying to be quick and I slowed myself down. When you talk about accessibility in the classroom and that some of the platforms that the schools are using aren't accessible, and I do applaud you when you say that you don't want that there's no material that would go across the desk that wouldn't in some way be accessible to a blind student. That is not necessarily a well accepted position. So I'm impressed by you saying that for sure. How, and I know it's collaboration between families, teachers, et cetera, but that's another pretty daunting task when you have people that aren't familiar with accessibility issues, and then they have platforms that are just, I mean, it's hard enough getting accessibility within the field without having people that really are new to the field and aren't even really that well versed in teaching people with cognitive disabilities. So how do you address that, or how do you solve that as best you can? I know it's unique, and again, that's not an easy question to answer quickly, and I don't want to run on. So whatever.
So we working with the team, and then we do have staff who are well versed in accessibility, and so relying on them to assist the team and work with the schools. I know that we rely heavily on Julie Jones works for the SER co-op, and she is very experienced, and we rely on her a lot on our questions. She, from the moment schools started picking what they wanted, she started working on accessibility and finding ways for it to be accessible. And then if it's not accessible, then talking with that team to figure out what would be a better platform. I know I heard a story about one school district started with one platform. When they discovered that it wasn't accessible, they actually switched so that it would be accessible to all their students. So that was really good. Again, it's that same thing, Mike, where we have to, not everything is accessible. And the more we can educate and the more these companies realize that it should be accessible to all, the better off we're going to be, because it'll make our jobs easier.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Lisa? Hearing none. Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Hearing none, Annette had asked to add Anita Payette for our final presentation to give you guys kind of a pulse of what's happening here at ASDB, and HR has been busy adjusting and adapting and attempting to support our staff and students.
Good afternoon, Board President Nigro, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Rex. Our goal and role in human resources is to provide quality customer service, support, guidance, and resources to assist our staff members. I'd like to bring you up to date on the COVID activities happening in HR since March. We were able to transition over to remote work rather quickly due to our previous experience in working at different work sites where we provided support to our staff in their respective locations. We are available to assist staff members through phone, email, Google Chat, video, and in person. At the onset of COVID, we helped develop a consistent structure to implement administrative leave with pay for our staff members. This entailed developing procedures for principals and directors to manage staff attendance, reporting, and remote work. In addition, we assisted with implementing and adapting processes to support and guide the completion of hiring, performance evaluations, probationary status reviews, and the processing of human resources paperwork. On April 1st, 2020, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act went into effect. This act expanded the use of family medical leave and added emergency leave, sick leave to those who are being impacted by COVID-19. We implemented new leave forms, provided training to our supervisors, provided notification to all our staff members of the act, which started on April 1st and which will end December 31st. In July, we published agency communications about mask requirements, self-care and self-checks as our staff came in and out of the workplace, COVID resources, and COVID testing locations. Throughout our time navigating this new landscape, we still continued with our recruitment efforts for this school year. Before COVID, we were able to attend 8 in-person recruitment events. And after COVID, there were many of these events transitioned to virtual formats in which we attended 8 after COVID, at the onset of COVID. At these events, we're able to continue to feed our current talent pipeline with internships and practicums for this school year. Currently, we have 6 interns that started in the fall, and we hope to look to start 4 more this upcoming spring. Once the school year kicked off, Human Resources continued to collect information from staff members who were reporting out sick. This may entail assigning quarantine periods, informing staff members of their resources so that they may return back to work safely. This information is being reported to Maricopa and Pima County Health Departments, as well as to the Arizona Department of Health Services, in order to stop the spread and keep students and staff safe and healthy. We have seen an increase in requests for medical leave and reasonable accommodations due to the pandemic. Typically, each school year, we have on average 60 medical leave cases that we see throughout the year. Currently, for this school year, we're at 67. Reasonable accommodation requests have doubled from last year. Typically, we average 10 to 15 per year. We are at 29 currently for this school year. These increases are due to staff members who have a specific medical condition or disability that puts them at an increased risk for COVID-19. All of the work involving COVID has been accomplished with support, participation, and collaboration from other departments within ASDB. At this time, Human Resources would like to thank the ASDB Board of Directors, ASDB's executive and educational leadership teams, business services, information technology, operations, and our staff members for their collaborative efforts in such an extraordinary time. These times are not easy. It requires flexibility, patience, and creativity. We appreciate all of the work our staff members are doing in these challenging times. At this time, I'd like to thank you for your time and make myself available to answer any questions that you may have.
Looks like you're off the hook, Anita. You gave them all the data. They're ready to move on. So that concludes my Assistant Superintendent's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rex. We move on to item 1.05, information item, superintendent's report. Superintendent Reichman.
Good afternoon, President Nigro, the Assistant Superintendent Rex, members of the Board of Directors, and the Asdb community. Welcome to our December 3rd, 2020 board meeting. I'm happy to see you all here. As you've been hearing from our leadership team, there's been a lot of challenges for us so far this year. We've been meeting those challenges. We are providing the education and support that our students need across the state. So I just want to express my appreciation to the education leadership team, to the teachers, to the staff, to even our students for working so hard. As you've already heard, our teachers have never gone through this experience before. And that's true of everybody here. But I think for our teachers, most of us, if we've never taught in a classroom, we don't truly appreciate just how difficult the current environment is. Our teachers are having to provide in-person classroom instruction. At the same time, they're providing the remote instruction. That's never happened before. That's a new experience. And with these new experiences, while we're doing awesome, creative, productive work that's really giving high quality education and supports to our students, that work is also exhausting. You can see our leadership team, they're tired, they're exhausted. Our teachers are tired, they are exhausted. And even with that exhaustion, they're still able to, every day, to remind the students and themselves to wear the face covering, to follow the social distancing, and to wash their hands on a regular basis. And one thing that you may have kind of picked up on, but I want to highlight, is that during this time of the community spread of the virus, we've had, and we do have, individual staff with the virus. They have been infected. At the same time, we have not yet had any spread in our two campuses. We've not had any spread with our bus drivers, with the chaperone, with itinerant teachers. So our efforts to really set the model of you have to wear the face covering, you have to be socially distant, you have to wash your hands, and you have to stay home while you sit, it's working. Thus far, it's worked really well. So I just wanted to point that out to you. And at the same time, you, Asdb Board of Directors, this fall have had two very productive work study sessions. We had a work study session on September 24th and the second one on November 5th. During those two work study sessions, you were able to come up with 4 pillars and 12 priorities for the agency. So before I describe that, I want to remind you that in the last 5 to 6 years, ASDB has really been focused on rebuilding the foundation. So if we use the metaphor of a house, we have to start with the foundation. What's been our work with the foundation? Well, you may remember we identified and established the agency operating principles. That is ACT, accountability, collaboration, and transparency. We have made the effort to create a culture of continuous improvement and to make decisions based on data. And you heard a lot of data from our leadership team this afternoon. We've also been trying to ensure, as you heard from Jay Johnson, that the education and services we provide are consistent, include quality assurances, are sustainable, and have the continuity in our ability to provide those education and services statewide. That's the foundation. I think we have it. Now we are building the pillars, the frame of the house. And those 4 pillars that you identified are outstanding, let me start, excellent communication and relationships, outstanding student development, superb organizational culture, and effective resource management. Each pillar has 3 priorities. So we have a total of 12 priorities. I'm going to detail those priorities right now. So the first pillar, the 3 priorities is a first-rate customer service, build capacity with school districts, and community engagement. The second pillar has, under the outstanding student development, it's the early language acquisition, it's the high academic achievement, and it's social emotional learning. The third pillar is the superb organizational culture. Those 3 priorities are a culture of continuous improvement. We've talked about that a few times already. We as leaders will model servitude leadership. And third, we will focus on staff diversity. The 4th pillar on effective resource management, the 3 priorities are human resource optimization. That is the best use of our people. The second priority is human and capital resource alignment. The third is the IT, the technology, integration, and improvement. So we have our framework. We're getting ready to build the house of ASDB. So today's agenda, as we go further on, we look at the schedule for 2021. We are proposing 2 more work study sessions, one possibly in February 4th, and another one in April 8th. So the next step for you, the board of directors, is to review those priorities to make sure that you are in agreement with the direction we're going, and then to look at possible metrics for the agency when we identify the metrics, then we will be able to measure our progress towards meeting the priorities that we have identified here. So I just want to thank you that during this time of the pandemic, that you took the time to come together and to come up with the pillars and with the priorities. I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion with you. And I'll take any questions at this time, if you have any. Doesn't seem to be any questions, so I'll turn it back over to you, David.
Thank you, Superintendent, for that report. We can move on now to 2.01. Action item, approval of the consent agenda consistent with board policy to include items.
This is Shelley.
Oh, hi, Shelley.
Mr. Nigro. Hello. I do have class at 6 o'clock. Oh, sorry, nothing for you, Ms. Reichman. I just am asking if we can move up some of the items that we needed to discuss. I believe it was item 7 points. Give me one moment. 7.03 and 7.07, those two items. I'm wondering if we can move those up to discuss and vote before I have to leave before 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. Superintendent Reichman, do we have discretion to do that? I'm not sure. Do we need the board to vote to move those and take those out of order?
I don't know if we need the board vote to change the order of the agenda. I think you can decide that.
You need to vote.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That was Mark saying that we need to vote.
Yeah, that's Mark. You need to vote.
Yeah, that's the point I'm unclear about at the moment. I guess we would have a motion. Let's see. We're currently in 2.01. Would anyone on the board like to move that we take those two items out of order?
I believe she just asked that. That would be a motion in and of itself. So.
Okay, Shelley, if we.
This is Shelley. I move to move 7.03 and 7.07 up on the agenda to start the discussion before 2.01.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
This is Suke, I second. Oh.
Okay. Great. All in favor? You can either say aye or open your camera and do a thumbs up. So I see 1, 2, 3.
Aye.
I see.
Aye.
Thank you. I see all of us. So it's unanimous that we will take those out of order. So we'll hold 2.01. We'll proceed to 7.03. Discussion action item, proposed bill of the state legislature. Superintendent Reichman also noted that pursuant to ARS 38-431-03A3, the board may vote to go into executive session. Will not be open to the public for discussion, consultation from legal advice with the board's attorney as it relates to this item. Superintendent Reichman?
Yes. So I'll go ahead and try to explain the proposal here, and then we'll go from here. As you recall, earlier this year, I shared with you that ASDB and ADE had been an ongoing conversation with the Arizona Department of Education, ADE, about the responsibilities of the local education agencies, LEAs, and or District of Residence, DOR. During these discussions, ADE shared with us that it was their interpretation of our authorizing statutes that the LEAs, the District of Residence for students enrolled in our campus-based schools, the primary responsibility for those students went back to the LEA and or the District of Residence. This understanding was different from how we, ASDB, has understood our role and responsibility. Previous to that, we just assumed that the minute a student is accepted and enrolled into our campus-based programs, our schools, then we had primary responsibility for those students, that we were responsible for the registration, for the curriculum, for the assessment, for the student academic performance, the assessment testing results, and for the graduation. So in those conversations, becoming to understand that, ADE believes that the responsibility for the testing results and for the data reporting really resides with the local education agencies. So based on that understanding, we developed a document with ADE. That document I had shared with you earlier this year. It's just a document saying policies agreed to between ASDB and the local education agencies. We sent out that document earlier this fall to 88 school districts. 10 school districts signed and sent it back to us. 78 have not signed. We have gotten feedback from school districts asking us what is our intent and not being responsible for the student academic performance. So that's created a really difficult situation for us. And we are now, ASDB, we are now at a crossroad, and we're trying to figure out which path to take. Right now, I know of 2 paths. Maybe there are other paths that we've not yet considered at this point in time. But the 2 that I can see is, one is we do nothing. We stay with the status quo. We tell school districts that when they refer and we accept a student into our campus-based schools, yes, we provide the education, we do the curriculum, we do the graduation requirements, we will provide the assessment. However, the assessment results will go back to the school districts, and those school districts will have to include it in their letter grade, their accountability for the school district as a whole. And if we do that, to stay that course, we continue to get feedback from school districts that ASDB, if we are providing the education, then we should be accountable for the results of the education we are providing to our students. So that's the conundrum there. The second possible pathway is to look at our authorizing legislation that authorizes ASDB and to see if we can clarify the roles and responsibilities of ASDB. We did some research around the country. We looked at other schools for the deaf and schools for the blind, and we found examples of other schools for the deaf and schools for the blind who are designated as LEAs in their states. We looked specifically at the Utah School for the Deaf and Blind. They have in their state statute that says that for those students enrolled and attending the School for the Deaf and the School for the Blind, that the Utah School for the Deaf and Blind is an LEA for those students and are accountable for the education outcomes of those students. We actually took and whole that language in their statutes and put it into the proposed bill that you have a copy of right now. So that's our proposal to you. I think I'm going to turn this over to Orrin and Melissa to expand this a little bit more. Orrin Katkov and Melissa DeVries has been doing a pretty in-depth analysis of what it would mean for us to be an LEA. So Orrin and Melissa.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Orrin. Just, I guess for a little bit of history, since there's been school accountability, which is what, since NCLB days, 30 years about, ASDB has been responsible for the scores of the students who are in the day schools. So back in the day when we had a thing called AYP, ADE did work with ASDB to ensure that they were part of the accountability model. When ADE switched to the A through F letter accountability, it seems like around that time, for whatever reason, when it came to state accountability, ASDB fell off the map a little bit. Our scores on the state tests still did count toward our schools to where you could look up the schools and see the percentages of how kids are doing on the AIMS and the AZ merit. But there wasn't any, I guess, real accountability besides that. Interim Superintendent Marv Lamer came in, what was that, 5-6 years ago, with a specific mission for ASDB. I think part of that was to increase the accountability in the day schools. While Dr. Lamer was in, he did work with ADE to get ASDB within the federal accountability system, in which case both of our schools were deemed to be in school improvement. They were put on school improvement plans. We were able to work with both principals to really put good plans in place on how to turn around those schools. Dr. Lamer also worked with ADE to get us funding, like school improvement funding and Title I funding. And that's been kind of where we've been over the last 5 years is, again, trying to move forth of when the kids come to us, we take responsibility, and accountability is a good thing. It's that external influence that keeps people on top of their game. As Superintendent Reichman mentioned, in the last year, there's been some changes out as to how that statute is interpreted. And at this point, if the way that we're being interpreted is that we're not schools, but we're institutions. Therefore, the accountability has to go back to the LEAs. ADE is correct when they say nobody's being held accountable when it comes to state accountability for our kids. They were under federal accountability. For state accountability, that wasn't happening. And I think in trying to clarify the statute, that's something that we're trying to do to ensure that ASDB can be held accountable, can be the LEA once those kids do come to our campus programs. I'm trying to look at my notes here. And Melissa, feel free to chime in at any time. At this point, as Annette mentioned, any of the scores that are received here will go back to the school of record and district. That obviously is a concern of a lot of our partnering districts, and it makes sense. The analogy that I'm kind of using is when I hurt my shoulder back in the day, I went to my general physician, who then referred me to a specialist who I worked with for a matter of time. If anything bad happened between me and that specialist, I wouldn't go back and go after that general physician. That person referred me to a specialist. Now it's between me and the specialist. And if that specialist screws up, that's between me and him and her, not a matter of me going back and suing the general physician. So we are trying to clear that up, figure out a way that our schools can be schools. As you all know, there's a lot of pride when it comes to schools for the deaf. Any of you that were around 6 years ago when we had the 100-year anniversary, just seeing all the people that showed up through all the different cohorts through the years, and their pride to be able to have a diploma from our schools, to be part of an actual school and not something to where this is more of a place where we're going to put the students. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of responsibilities that still go back to the home district because we're not considered schools anymore.
So this is Melissa DeVries, and I'd like to jump in here. When the document went out about our roles and responsibilities with the public school districts, one of the things that we did is we had a lot of questions from our homeschool districts. And Kristen Rex and I fielded most of those questions. And the biggest problem that school districts had was in the accountability piece. And that was something that Annette Reichman had talked about when she was kind of presenting the problem. Some of our larger districts, Phoenix Union, Glendale Union, Litchfield, Tucson Unified, Amphitheater are all districts, and there were many others that said, why should we be sending you our kids when we're being held accountable for them and you're not? So that was a huge sticking point with the big changes that were implemented this last year in ASDB's roles.
And this is Oren one more time to piggyback on what Superintendent Reichman said. We did a lot of research here to see how are other state schools for the deaf and blind doing this. Utah, because they are kind of considered one of the best, we did quite a bit of research with them. We reached out to their superintendent of public instruction of Utah, and then Annette met with the actual superintendent of the school there. But just a list of other state schools for the deaf and blind where they are considered a kind of a special LEA, to where they're the LEA, but they're still identified as a unique entity. Just to go off the list, the Florida state schools for the deaf and blind are considered kind of the LEA. Utah, West Virginia, Michigan, Colorado, Tennessee, Hawaii, Louisiana, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Montana, and North Carolina. And And again, I believe a couple years ago, somebody on the board mentioned, do we look at what other state schools for the deaf and blind are doing? And we have been doing that. And as Superintendent Reichman said, what we're proposing in that bill, which I would still argue is a draft to some degree, is really what some of these top-notch schools for the deaf and blind are doing to provide the best access for their kids.
So this is Melissa again. One of the things that we had looked at too was, would the bill impact some of our funding our funding streams? And right now, what we're looking at in this draft bill does not affect our funding stream, which is right now the in the voucher program, in the institutional vouchers. And so that's a separate part of Arizona statute. And in the changes that we were talking about and discussing in the draft and have been, working through as a team, the changes that have to do with the funding pieces, the R2 404, that does not change, as well as the classroom site fund, the 1305, that does not change as well. Another area that had been kind of brought to our attention as a possible area of concern was in the area of resolution. And with if there's a dispute among parents and our providers, our homeschool district, Arizona Department of Ed dispute resolution gets involved. Prior to this year, we were held accountable if the action was us not implementing the IEP as it should be planned. If it was something that the school district said that they were going to do or were supposed to do, then the school district was held accountable. So again, our proposed changes in looking at us becoming accountable does not change the accountability that we've always had as far as dispute resolution and making sure that we're going through due process. We still share in that responsibility, and if it's something that we said that we were supposed to do, then we're the ones that we want to be held accountable for what we were supposed to be doing.
And this is Oren. I guess the last thing to add is the whole point is, how can we make it to where ASDB, when it comes to the accountability, that every child in Arizona is held accountable, but the ones who are in our day school, we're the ones who will be held accountable. We were in federal school improvement before, so going back to that, if we're in improvement, we'd be in federal improvement, and then on the state side to put us in the A through F accountability, which is on the state side the accountability model. Superintendent Reichman, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted us to elaborate on.
I think we have given our board members a lot to think about. So I'm going to turn this back over to David.
Thank you, Superintendent. From here, I think if there's any board member that wants to discuss this with our attorneys, we'd have to go to executive session to do that. So that probably makes sense to do that first. Is there any board member that would like to enter executive session for the purposes of discussing this with the attorneys?
So just out of clarification, David, this is Mark Sims. It would be to speak to our attorneys about whether or not we can or can't recommend a statute, or is it to speak to our attorneys about whether or not there is or isn't a legal issue?
It's not whether or not we can take this action. It's whether or not we have if this were adopted, would that change our legal position on various items throughout the agency? In other words, if we were to put this forward, would we have would that change our legal position with regard to any event or matter that's ongoing?
Okay, I mean, Okay, I'm not sure that that's the legal counsel. I mean, it's typically, you know, is there a legal counsel about this specific issue? Not what are the downstream implications of it? You know, that would be something that if that legal issue arose, then we would need legal counsel.
Okay, Mike.
I have some questions, legal questions that about potential conflicts about where this red line might be headed. And I'm not sure if that would qualify for executive session or not, but I'd like those questions answered by our AAG if that's possible. So I'm suggesting executive session.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. I'm okay if you want to go there. I mean, it seems to me the concept is to have a discussion about whether or not this is or isn't a good idea. In other words, you know, the status quo is actually a new status quo as compared to reverting to the prior way that the agency would work. Now, so I'll just throw in my 2 cents. The data and the history and the test scores do not demonstrate that that prior situation before this change to the new status quo was the least bit effective, that the agency was doing a good job. In fact, the perception out in the community was it was an insulated world, an insulated institution that nobody could change or nobody could get to move. It was kind of the kids were put into this system and the system did what it did and the districts really didn't have any say. And I would say it's pretty reasonable to say that the Flagstaff issue is a direct result of this, that the Flagstaff district didn't feel that they could hold ASDB accountable. So from my perspective, I'm not sure why we would want to lessen accountability. You know, the question that Ort said was, you know, or the question that was posed was, why should a district send a student to ASDB when the district is accountable? The fundamental answer to that is because we're the pros from Dover and we provide great services and we're going to help your kids so much that it's going to reflect well on your district. That seems to be a very simple answer to that question. Not, well, this not a shimmy about who ultimately is responsible, because it's about the kids, not about the measurements. The other comment I'd make is the analogy of the surgical specialist. So I am a specialist. And so the way I'm held accountable is if I don't do a good job, the primary care doctor doesn't send me any more patients. And so that's why you actually want these trails of accountability. So if you don't do a good job and the district gets a bad outcome, they'll stop sending you patients or students. So to me, this seems like a very great transformative thing. I actually haven't heard what would be the fundamental crux reason that we would want to send a statute to the legislature. So if there's some, I would like to hear from the executive team what the fundamental thing we are doing or why the status quo is something we should go away from. So I don't need legal counsel for that. I would just say, if the board thinks that that's okay, I mean, we can seek legal interpretation, but from my perspective, I'm a no, unless somebody can tell me why we want to revert to something that historically demonstrated poor educational outcomes for several decades. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. And right, the discussion of whether or not to adopt this certainly is in public and not subject to executive session. So, you know, certainly we want to hear your comments on that, which we just did. In terms of the Mike, I know that you had some legal questions. Is this something that you would like to go into executive session about to ask our counsel, or do you think these questions are more related to whether or not we should approve this measure, or if you have additional questions for the administrative team?
If you're a no, you don't need.
What's that?
If you're a no, you don't need legal counsel.
Can I ask who wrote the red line?
Who wrote the red line? Murphy. She did that. Again, using the Utah State Schools for the Deaf and Blind. Their statutes, we just literally pulled that out and put that in to the current draft that we're looking at.
I think.
Sorry, I beg your
Oh, go
pardon. Yes, hello, Mike. Yes, I use the Utah statute as a template based upon my understanding of what the administrative team wanted to achieve with this red line.
And what did the administrative team want to achieve with this red line?
The administrative team, to my understanding, and Annette, correct me if I'm wrong, but the administrative team wanted to be able to accept accountability specifically for the campus-based schools. So we are specifically talking only about the Tucson-based campus and the Phoenix Day School for the Deaf, and accountability would remain with the districts of residence for those students who are based in the itinerant programs.
I'm not sure if we need to go in executive session or not, but I would prefer that we do if I'm going to ask questions that might be questionable, just to make sure that we're on the same page.
If there are questions that are aimed at getting legal counsel, then we certainly can do that. If they're hard questions that relate to other matters, then now, here's the place to do it.
Have we? All right. So in writing this, did we consider the full scope of Arizona revised statutes as they surround what it means to be an LEA? I guess specifically, and I'm not a lawyer, so at a first read, like the definition of LEA in 34 CFR 30323. Had we considered the full scope of how this might conflict with either other state laws or federal laws, or how it might affect funding, like specifically outside of the band that was written and provided?
Is that for me to answer, Mike?
For the executive team or Maria, sure, certainly.
Okay, so what I can tell you about my process is that we went ahead and did a roundtable with our subject matter experts, with Oren, with Melissa. I also had the opportunity to consult with Shayna Cooper regarding the financial implications, with Paul Creasy regarding any E-rate and IT implications. I also had the opportunity to meet with Annette, with Kristen multiple times, and we did run this by Deborah Sterling, our AAG, for review as well. So, and Annette, if you'd like to jump in, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the question is, did we do a thorough analysis of other related state statutes and federal statutes? No, we have not done that. Obviously, we know we need to do that. That what we have right now is a draft, and we recognize there will be revisions as we go along.
Annette, I'm just going to jump in and say I did have the opportunity to, and I apologize for interrupting, Mike, I'm sorry. I did have the opportunity to look at statutes for other states as well, which is how I hit upon the Utah statute as the one that seemed to be the best fit for what the stated objective was. So I did do, yes, some of that.
Okay. So if we're looking at Utah, and I apologize, am I interrupting Mark? I see a hand up. I guess my question is, like for Utah, their accountability laws and their definitions, that the law that you cut from looks like it was one among many that looked at the full scope of accountability funding, a whole host of items that would allow that to happen. And I'm concerned that we're inventing a term, limited LEA, which seems to limit input from the district of responsibility, while at the same time holding, I think from the abstract, trying to both have accountability for ASDB, but at the same time holding the district's responsibility to account to some extent. And I see some obvious conflicts with federal statute in the way that it's written. That, and if I'm not a lawyer, but some of the pieces I don't know how they ended up endorsed by ASDB to share if we haven't done some basic testing against federal and state statute. Like I'm very uncomfortable with just the narrow band of edits that was shared with the team without looking at the full scope of the legality of what's being suggested. And I know that for several years, we've talked about the issue of having representation at like our IEP meetings and buy-in from the stakeholders that we're attempting to serve with these populations. I don't know if the perception of cutting them out of the accountability pieces for the kids that are living in their communities, that eventually after graduating, they're going to be going back to those communities. How we want to limit the scope of influence that our stakeholders have when it relates to providing us students. I have a couple of questions. Have we explored, I mean, we haven't had a whole lot of time to consider the new status, what folks are calling the new status quo. But I think if looking back, we can point to some issues with data reporting and outcomes and a whole host of issues that the current status may assist with. And if we want to be held to account for the test scores, why can't we be held to account by the LEAs that are sending us these kids? I know as a former special ed director, high school sped director, you know, I was one of the folks that would go to every IEP at ASDB because those were my kids. I understood that this was the least restrictive environment for those kids, but I was invested in making sure that they had the best experience we could give them, and I was willing to be held to account for those kids because they're my kids. The perception that we're kind of moving away from that, I think I have perhaps some ethical problems with that, but also some legal issues and how that would fit, how that relates to IDEA, which has, I understand, a bit of a different, well, that's the federal law, might have a different philosophical take on LRE. But when we're looking at holding someone to account to ensure that I think these kids need to have as many eyes as we can have on them. You need to have people really concerned about how these kids are testing, how they're doing post-secondary, if their SEL needs are being met, active participation by community members in IEP meetings annually. And I'm just really concerned that this might take away from some of those steps that we've been trying to look forward to. And I'm also not super sure that the way this is written, it looks like I saw this for the first time a couple of days ago, without really anticipating that this was coming down the pike. But narrowly writing that we're also going to now be accepting federal funds. It's a bit more complex than that. So I'm afraid that this might not be the tool. If the goal is to access those federal funds, that this might not be the way that we're actually going to accomplish that, if that's what you're trying to accomplish. So there are a number of concerns, and I'm not sure if this is the right time or version of how this has gone, or if we want to. And maybe this is actually part of a strategic plan. I mean, this wasn't discussed at if this is what the agency that wants to see happen currently. Maybe we should all build it out and talk about what the benefits are. Because I'm not sure if we've had that opportunity to look at what's in the best interest of these kids long term. And I'm not prepared to vote for something that I'm not sure if ethically I'm with yet. Not saying that there's not plenty of room to hold a lot of folks to account when it comes to the outcomes of these kids. But as a former consumer, I would be remiss to think that creating any kind of a barrier between the LEAs that are having these kids attend with us, if it's in their best interest to limit the accountability, to make sure that those folks know that these kids are taken care of. And that's more of an emotional piece that I wasn't quite going to go down. I think just the legal concerns with how this is written, with the narrow scope, comparing it to a state that does not have a state institution in their constitution, that doesn't have the same voucher funding flow, that doesn't have, there's basically 53 different ways, because of the territories of the United States, 53 different unique ways that these schools are put together. We've talked about this repeatedly. And, God bless Arizona in 1916 when we became a state. We wrote a constitution and it memorialized the state hospital and Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and Blind. So I think before we could consider acting, we should maybe take a step back, take a look at the full scope. How do we hold ourselves being Asdb, how do we hold ourselves accountable? Do we have data sharing agreements that we could point to issues? Have we explored other options before coming up with a fairly narrowly written piece of state legislation that might perhaps create more issues than it solves? And before we go about that, take a deep dive, take a look at the other state statutes that are perhaps more difficult to rewrite than this one, and take a deep dive look at how this interacts with IDEA. Philosophically, at our SEA, ADE is held to account by OSEP, who sees things fairly black and white. And if we haven't taken a look at how this affects any of those pieces, I'd be very remiss in being able to offer support at this point. Or if this is truly what that the board of directors wants to see happen for our kids in our state. And I'm not sure if we want to go over some of those legal questions now in executive session or not, or if we want to hear out what some other folks have to say. But and I'm not even sure if we're looking for an action item right now, Superintendent, or if we're just looking for discussion.
I would like to hear from other board members, their thoughts as well.
This is Lynn. I agree with Mike. And going back to what Melissa said about school districts' reaction when they first found out that the test scores would go back to their schools, I know, and I heard from a number of districts that were shocked and, oh no, that can't happen. We're not providing instruction. We don't want to be responsible for the test results, but that was an initial reaction. And what I'm hearing now, and I cannot speak for all school districts, just the ones that I hear from, and there's a few, they want to make sure that ASDB is accountable for the kids, that they can keep an eye on those test scores. And if they aren't coming up to where they need to be, then districts, they want to do what's best for their kids. And by having that little bit of accountability and contact, they can make sure that their kids are getting the best that they can get. So I'm not for this bill at this point.
Are there other board members?
This is Suke. I liked the point that Mark brought up, that if this, or it might have been Mark, it might have been Mike, that if this is a way that we are looking to move, that I do think it needs to be part of the strategic plan. And I, for one, would like to have a more in-depth discussion to make sure that it's not only in alignment with current state educational statutes, but also with the federal ones, and maybe put it on one of the agendas for one of the upcoming work study sessions as part of our discussion within the strategic planning process. I don't want to make a short-sighted decision, and I do think we need to look at some of the macrocosm impacts as opposed to just the current microcosm impacts.
Are there other board members that would like to speak?
This is Mike. I just have a quick question. I think the statistics are the number of districts that supported and how many would not sign on. What were those figures currently? Do we get those? Or not?
So this is Oren. At the current count, we have had 10 out of the 88 that have submitted it.
Okay, thank you.
And Superintendent Reichman, to clarify, this is, we're only talking about the brick and mortar schools, correct? Not the co-ops.
Yes, that's right. We're only talking about the campus-based schools, which is PDSD, ASD, ASB, those three schools.
Great. And I would note, in terms of the strategic plan, it's kind of already there. So we have one of our guiding principles is accountability is paramount and defined. So this is, this issue certainly is in our strategic plan now. So when we talk about it, that's one of the principles that we're furthering by tackling this and related issues.
Yeah, Mike, or David, so that's where I'm confused. I don't understand how not allowing the district to hold us accountable makes us more accountable.
I don't think that's the issue, right? So the way that this worked a couple of years ago is that the agency would be, with the schools, PDSD and ASD and ASB, would be accountable for the testing scores for those students, as opposed to those scores being attributed to the sending LEAs. And then this change would mean that reporting responsibility, or the change that happened a few months ago in terms of statutory interpretation, was that the sending LEAs would be responsible for reporting that data, as opposed to the agency itself. So in other words, the scores from the brick and mortar school students, not the itinerant students. The itinerant students were always and continue to be under their individual LEAs. But here, instead of being aggregated and reported as as ASDB scores, they'd be sent back to the LEAs. I think part of it would be harder to see how we're doing if we're not aggregating those scores together and reporting them ourselves and being accountable for them to ourselves. This is not to say that there may be other issues with this, that, as Mike pointed out, but if we have, I think generally more accountability is better than less. For as an agency.
Help me understand, and I'm not an educational pathway expert, so all the money and all of the acronyms and all of that are way beyond me, right? I don't really have an idea what IDEA is, but that's an aside. The reality is the district chooses or suggests that a student go to the brick and mortar school, correct? And sends funds that way, correct?
There's a determination that it's the least restrictive environment, and they and the IEP team decides to send it to one of the brick and mortar schools.
Right, and so if you look at the district as somebody who, and then they say, oh my gosh, look at these scores, we're not going to send them there anymore because they're not doing well. Why is the pathway of accountability gone? I mean, to me, that's a relationship issue. In other words, there's nothing that would prevent ASDB from getting those scores from those districts. And so then it's entry and aggregation, unless I don't understand, but ultimately, the measurements of your outcome, the scores are what they are. The issue is if you look at the referring district as a customer, then they can hold you accountable for what happens to the product that you deliver. And so if you put it all within ASDB, then the kids are put onto these brick and mortar schools, and then the district just kind of wash their hands of where they actually referred. So going back to that specialist primary care analogy, the primary care doctor sends them to the specialist and doesn't care about the outcome of their patient. No, that's not how it works. The primary care doctor sends somebody to a specialist and wants their patient to continue to succeed, which is exactly what the home district should want, is that their kid to succeed. And the way they know they're succeeding is they get the test scores. I'm just not understanding, unless somebody can help me, how that's a bad thing. I understand it's a more difficult thing, but I'm not sure that it's a bad thing.
Oren, did you want to add to that with what we're doing currently versus?
Sure. So no matter which direction we go, if it's the new status quo or trying to go back to the old status quo, under both situation, the IEP team always had the right to pull the kid from our day schools if they didn't feel like it was the least restrictive environment. So no matter which model we go, the home district always has that mechanism to say at the IEP meeting, we're not seeing the growth here, or we're not liking the scores. Therefore, we might be second guessing this placement.
But least restrictive is different than quality, right? In other words, what they could say is this is maybe we have to look for a different least restrictive environment because you guys aren't cutting the mustard.
It could. I mean, the least restrictive environment is supposed to give the child the best access to the education. So if we're not showing that we're doing the scores, then it could be what else is out there, what are the other options for the student? And no matter which way it goes, that'll always be an opportunity for the IEP team.
Not every district sends to our agency. So there are districts in the state that do not interpret that our agency is the least restrictive environment, that there are alternatives that are just as suitable for children, correct? In their determination.
In their determination, they have students of which we are not the least restrictive. They don't see us as the least restrictive environment.
Right, because what we're talking about are two different things. Least restrictive is different than best quality. And so the question becomes, from my perspective, it's about the quality. In other words, so when they say that, sometimes they're maybe using that as a little bit of a word to say, well, this is a least restrictive environment too, where they're kind of like saying, but it's really a better education. I'm not saying it is or isn't the case, but that sounds to me to be like the best competition for accountability out there, right? It's a free market concept that, the way that the tide will rise is through competition. And so if the agency can't deliver a good educational product, the parents and the school districts will vote with their feet. They'll go somewhere else. when you take away that accountability, it's great. You have a passive people, kind of the district drops them off, and it doesn't reflect on them. So whether or not that is the least restrictive environment is not the issue. They're not held accountable in the reverse about quality. And so to me, it seems like this is, and I suspect that's why ADE came to this conclusion that ultimately somebody thinks that this is a better model in terms of accountability. That's I could be wrong, but Mike Manley would have better insight. I'm just kind of shooting off the cuff there because, again, I don't know any of the acronyms.
And actually, I think our decision was based on the Attorney General, not in a vacuum at ADE.
Right, but my point is those statutes exist for a reason.
Sure.
Somebody
we want to make sure that we're
some-
protecting these kids and making
Right.
sure that folks are watching out for them.
So that's, I make a motion that we vote on this action, whether or not there should be forwarded as a statute.
I'm sorry, Mark, so you're moving to not
Decide, yes or no, should we advance this statute to the legislature?
Well, I think we should decide. I mean, I think that's.
I can ask for a second or not. So
I mean, well, we're going to vote to decide. I mean, I think you should move to either table this or move to not send it, or move to send it. I mean, one of those three things.
right. So I make a motion to have that vote. The vote to not send it.
Well, yeah, well, that's what I mean. We can have that vote, but you have to make a right. We have to take one of those.
Yeah, right. So
I'll second that motion. This is Dean.
Wait, are we voting not to send it or to send it?
not. If you say yes, you are voting not to send it.
Okay, so we have a motion to not send this bill to the legislature. So all in favor of not sending. So again, to be clear, voting for this motion means we're not sending this bill at this time to the legislature or in this form to the legislature. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Mike, any Suke, did you vote?
Yeah, I'm sort of on, I sort of have a question of, does that completely pull this off the table for future discussion, or if will there be a revisit?
It just means that we're not going to approve it or send it today.
At this time,
at this meeting or in this form, yes.
Okay, then I'm in favor of that.
Okay, I'm too. Any opposed? No? Okay, so that has concluded, so we will not be saying that. Mike?
As an employee of the Department of Education and a certified special ed teacher, we're invested in the success of these kids, and 100%. If we can work with Superintendent Reichman and get to the gist of where we want folks to be held to account, we're 100% open to doing whatever we can do to help our subpopulations that are served in this institution, constitutionally defined institution. And I obviously the discussion isn't over, but I want to portray the willingness to do what we think is in the best interest of these kids in the state, from Littlefield to Yuma. So we need to cover the entire state and think of what's in the best interest of all these kids. So
Okay.
while we've voted to not move this forward now, this discussion I'm sure is going to continue, and I'd really like for this to be a true collaboration. Sorry, soapbox. I wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. So now we can move on to the next agenda item. So we had voted earlier in the meeting to move out of order just a bit. I believe we're going down to 7:07. Discussion action item, election of 2021 board officers pursuant to policy shall be the last meeting of the calendar year. So for this one, we need a president and a secretary. So we should probably discuss president first, if there are any discussion or any
I'm so sorry to interrupt. This is the captioner. I am in dire need of a break.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to find a spot, but I'm not very accurate now, and I just need that break.
Okay. Is it possible to take a 5-minute break? Can I'll move to adjourn for, I'm sorry, not adjourn. I'll move to take a 5-minute break.
Break sounds good.
I'm going to need 10.
10? Okay. All right, we will pause now. Or does anyone, does any of the board members second that motion?
UK does.
Suke does. Okay, great. All those in favor for a 10-minute break, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Dean, Natalie, Shelley, any opposed? Okay, I don't see any opposed. So let's all take a break. It is now 6:30. At 6:40, we will resume. So thank you. Hello, everyone. It is now 6:41. Want to make sure everyone is back online and that we are ready to resume. All right. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. So we were on 707, election of 2021 board officers pursuant to policy. We will need a president and a secretary. So I'll entertain discussion first for president.
I would like to nominate David Nigro to continue.
Thank you, Lynn. I certainly would accept the nomination.
Shelley, second.
Are there any other nominations? Okay. All right. So Lynn, would you move to?
I move to nominate David Nigro to be our president for the next year.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. And a second?
Mike Manley, like the second.
Mike? Okay. All in favor? Say aye, or show you a show of hands would be good. Thank you. And any opposed? And seeing none, that carries. For secretary, I'd like to open it up for any nominations for secretary.
Suke? Why don't we keep the team together? I move to nominate Suke.
I am not opposed to that at all. My one concern is if the governor's office should come around to appointing my replacement on ACTHH's board, I would no longer be representing ACDHH. And my term with ASDB would be done if they don't move me into another position.
Okay.
We'll keep you till that time, Suke.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say we had the exact same conversation last year, and
right,
we did.
So.
We
and
did.
Look how far we've gotten.
Yeah. So
they interviewed me. They did interview me for the board position, so that's a step in the right direction.
Good.
That is. So I have Dean. Your hand is raised, Dean.
I'm seconding the motion.
Seconding the motion. Excellent. So all those in favor for Suke to be secretary?
Okay.
Shelley, any opposed? And none opposed. So that carries. Thank you, Suke. So with that done, we're going to go back to 2.01.
So Shelley,
Oh, yes.
just to let you know, I'm going to step out. I have to return to my class. Okay.
Okay.
I will see you all the next time.
All right. Thank you, Shelley. 2.01 action item, approval of the consent agenda consistent with board policy to include items 3.01, 5.02, 7.02, 7.04, and 7.05. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, or to, in the alternative, to remove any of those items from the consent agenda?
Lynn, I move to approve action item 2.01.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, I see. Suke seconds. All in favor, please say aye, or raise a hand or a thumbs up. And any opposed? Okay, so the consent agenda passes. We can move on to 3.02 action item, Approval of new district agreements. Dr. Rex, there are two new agreements that are up for consideration. Did you have anything to say about either of those?
Not at all. I just know that that was a board request whenever we added new districts to make you all aware of what we're bringing into our house. So this is a simple action item with a someone to motion and a second.
Great. And these, Dr. Rex, these are all the typical agreements. I know sometimes with some of the tribes, we have special, terms and things like that. So
Nope.
there's no other term that's out of the ordinary in these.
No.
Okay. Great. So do I have a motion to approve these contracts?
I move that we approve the new contracts.
Okay. Second. Okay. Sue K seconds. All those in favor, say aye or a wave or a thumbs up.
Aye.
Your video, aye. And any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next up is item 4.01, information item finance report. Shana Cooper.
Shana Cooper, Executive Director of Business Services. Good evening, Board President Nigro, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, members of the board, and the ASDB community. Our most recent Finance Committee meeting was held yesterday on December 2nd with board members Manley and Gordon and Superintendent Reichman. In summary, we reviewed in detail and discussed the October 31, 2020 and 2019 budgetary and fiscal year budget to actual comparison reports, the available cash balance, the grant revenues and expenditures report, and also looked at the student enrollment as of November 1st, 2020 in comparison to November 1st, 2019. Provided to each of you is the same financial data, but in a more condensed, summarized version. And as referenced on page 1, there were 519.53 filled full-time equivalents and 71 vacant positions as of November 1st. For enrollment, as of November 1, 2020, ASDB had 2,092 students, and as of November 1st, 2019, we had 2,104 students, so a difference of about 12 students. You'll see the details of the decrease on the bottom of page 1 as well as on page 2. Page 3 begins a financial summary based on the comparative data for October 31, 2020 compared to October 31, 2019. And what you will see is that the collected revenues for BFY or budget fiscal year 2021 of $4.1 million, which is $1.6 million lower compared to last year's $5.8 million. The decline is primarily in our voucher revenues received, as well as the loss of a majority of the ADE federal grant funding that we've talked about previously, which have included the Title I, Title II, Title IV, as well as the IDEA basic and preschool grants. So what that means is we have not been able to spend on those grants because they were not awarded, which means we have not been able to receive reimbursement for any of those expenditures that would have been incurred on those grants. Total expenditures have decreased by about $100,000, and most of that decline is due to the in-state and out-of-state travel. Although our expenditures are showing a slight decline from last year to this year, we do have some other operating expenditures that were not originally budgeted for, but the funding is being able to provide and respond to the coronavirus pandemic, where we still are continuing to monitor and ensure our staff, as well as students and teachers, receive the equipment and supplies needed. So example, the face coverings and humanity shields. And we're also improving the use of our education technology and supporting the distance learning. On page 9 of the report, you'll see comparing actual revenues to the expenditures that I've talked about, we are showing a deficit of $5.6 million when you compare those actual revenues to expenditures. And so what that means in layman terms is that we've been having to use our June 30 available cash balance as well as our general fund appropriations. Again, as I've mentioned before, this really isn't of any particular concern at this time, as we are still waiting and are expected to receive the voucher revenues for the month. So there are no concerns there. What I've had to do is just continue to monitor the cash balance, as well as making sure that we're using other funding sources until those revenues are received. You'll also notice in this month's report, because the first quarter basic financial statements were not able to be provided in the September 9th board meeting, you'll also see the financial reports for the quarter of September 30, 2020 and 2019. I have included those reports beginning on page 10, and those reports consist of our basic financial statements, which would be our balance sheet, income statement, as well as our statement of cash flows for the fiscal year. With the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, again, it's still difficult for me to continue to draw conclusions about the potential impact to the operations for the year. We are still continuing to encourage everyone to think about how to spend less, as well as continue to try to implement continuous cost-saving initiatives where we can, and look at other available funding sources to use. The team is still continuously working hard on processing payroll, invoice payments, and we're also reviewing and preparing our our July through November monthly budget package updates. And based on all of the data so far, there are not any immediate material concerns based on what I do know. Again, I still continue to monitor our revenues, expenditures, and our cash balances very closely, as well as watching our student enrollment and usage of the general fund appropriations. So we will continue to plan for uncertainty as well, and making sure that our expenditures do not exceed our revenue sources, and any continued unforeseen needs or requirements created by the COVID-19 pandemic will require expenditure reductions to ensure that we're fiscally solvent. If there's no questions on any of the information presented, that concludes my report of the agency's information and fiscal data.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Ms. Cooper? Mike?
Just continue to be super impressed with the level of transparency that Shana brings to this. It's extremely helpful, and she can answer questions straight away. It's night and day. Super appreciated, and it gives us a very clear picture of what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Ms. Cooper? No. Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to 5.01 action item, approval of superintendent evaluation. You all have seen in the executive content section of board docs the results of that evaluation that was conducted in the last few weeks. If anyone would like to take discussion of it, we certainly can do that. Is there any?
I just wanted to say thank you. 5 of the 9 submitted evaluations. Those 5 evaluations were put together into a summary sheet. Dr. Nancy Alexander did that for us. Just general summary, generally, the evaluations provided evidence that the board continues to be supportive of the work that I'm doing as your superintendent and the work of our agency. The highest rated areas were specifically on the leadership delegation, that I'm good at delegating to the leadership team different responsibilities, that I have good rapport with the deaf community, You also said that I'm really good at keeping you informed about the most recent policy changes about issues that are going on. Some areas for improvement where I was rated lower. One was I need to improve my relationships in working with the blind community. Another one was to bring together the board with the agency leadership team to have more collaboration between the board and the agency leadership team. So an area of focus, which I am doing, will continue to do, is that continuous improvement of the agency, the entire agency. And that I need to continue to work with you as a board to increase your knowledge and understanding of the agency's work. You commented that in the areas of operations and finances that we've been able to demonstrate significant improvements. And that another area that I need to improve on is to really focus on communicating with external stakeholders, including the blind community. There were several mentions of wanting to know more about the work that the regional cooperatives are doing. We need to be providing more information related to that. So that, in a nutshell, some of the feedback that you provided. I really appreciate you taking the time to do the evaluation, and I will do my part to follow up on the feedback that you've given me. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. If there are no other comments on that, we can entertain a motion to approve the evaluation for the record.
This is UK, so moved.
I see a second. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, thank you. And the next item is going to be 7.01, introduction and possible discussion of policies GC, FCA, GCG, and GCR. Ms. Murphy.
Good evening, board members. You have before you the red lines of policies GCFCA, GCG, and GCR. They were submitted to you for review. There was one question regarding some language about GCFCA, and I'm going to continue to work with Director Pyatt to just get some clarification around substitute certifications. They were posted on the website, and I have not received any public comments on them. And at this time, I am available for your questions.
Lynn?
Oh, no.
Oh, no, okay.
Sorry.
So, Ms. Murphy, before these come up for the second read, we'll have the answer to that, the substitute.
Yes, and I believe that what you were referring to was reciprocal certifications. And so what we'll do is we'll tweak the language to make sure that it's very clear that we're talking about substitute certifications.
Right, yeah, that's exactly it.
Yes, and Ms. Pyatt and I have we're going to get together to just figure out how we're going to tweak that language on Monday.
Okay. Great, thank you. If there are no other questions, that was information items, so we can move down to 706, discussion and possible action items, set calendar for 2021 regular board meetings. I think Superintendent Reichman, you can discuss part of this. I think what we're doing is looking at, or the primary thing that we're doing is looking to schedule the work sessions in February and April. But Superintendent Reichman.
Yes, and also just to put on the table, the January meeting is scheduled to be in Tucson. Knowing that the community transmission continues to increase, we may want to change that to Phoenix and to continue the virtual meeting until perhaps the summer. That's the other. So there was two parts to the calendar that I wanted to bring back to the board for consideration.
Correct, and I think the other issue, and again, I understand that the COVID situation being what it is, it was looking much different in September. It was looking a lot better, and now it's not looking great. The other issue, I think in July we have set that meeting for Flagstaff, and I understand there may be some difficulty getting space there, but Sedona looks like the better northern location or an area around in the Sedona area. Is that also the case?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Yes.
Great. So maybe on this, we'd relocate the July 22nd meeting from Flagstaff to Sedona. I hope that by July we'll be able to do that in person. We'll of course we'll see. Does anyone have any issues with the February 4th or April 8th dates? Or if we can't do that, we can follow it up with a doodle poll and approve it in our January meeting. But if anyone has an issue with those dates, please let us know now. Okay, it doesn't look like we have anyone with an issue with that date, which is great. And then moving to Phoenix, is there anyone with an issue of moving the January meeting to Phoenix with the likelihood that will be done virtually? No? Okay. Great. So I think if that is all set, then I think we would entertain a motion, or I can make a motion. I move that we adopt the proposed work session dates of February 4th, 2021 and April 8th, 2021, as well as move the location of the January 14th, 2021 meeting to Phoenix from Tucson, and moving the July 22nd, 2021 meeting from Flagstaff to Sedona. Second?
I second.
Okay. All those in favor? I see Mike, Mark, Lynn, Dean, and Mike Manley. Any opposed? Okay, great. So we've now made those changes. Letitia, if you can inform the board, perhaps send some calendar invitations on those, and it were otherwise distributed to the board, so we're all on the same page. That would be excellent. Item 8.01, call of the public on non-agendized items. Again, in keeping with the earlier entry, we advertised the public comment email address in advance of the meeting. We did not receive any emails to that address for item 8.01. So we can continue to 8.02, discussion item, agenda items for the next regular board meeting scheduled for January 14th, 2021. Is there anyone that would like to have some discussion on that? No. Seeing none. We move to 9.01, action item adjournment. Lynn?
That's my job. I move to adjourn this meeting.
Okay, and a second. Suitcase seconds. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you everyone for making this possible, for coming to the meeting, and thank you to the media department for getting this together, and again assembling what I know is a difficult production to get it together, get the captioning, get the interpreting, and making sure the meeting is accessible to all. And again, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your month.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
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 Happy holidays.